'Tis I. Hey everyone, glad to see you back, glad to see you looking fresh, and today I wanted to talk about Telltale Games, a game company, a game studio that is no longer around. It kind of, sort of is still around, and I'll get into that in just a second. But Telltale Games made some of the most interesting games in the 2010s. They started as a smaller studio, and they made stuff like Sam & Max, and they expanded further, eventually getting their hands on properties such as Jurassic Park and Back to the Future, and I think that's where people started to, hear the names more and more. It's because, oh, there's a new Jurassic Park game. Oh, there's a new Back to the Future game. And Back to the Future specifically is kind of a bigger deal than Jurassic Park, because Back to the Future, this was seen as a rough sequel to Back to the Future 3, a franchise that is destined to never get a sequel or a reboot. Hopefully, I'm sure it will be after Robert Zemeckis, the director of Back to the Future, passed away. I'm sure we'll end up with a reboot, remake, sequel, I don't know. But this was kind of it. This pseudo-sequel to Back to the Future. Now, mixed reception on both Jurassic Park and Back to the Future, but it got their foot in the door in some very big studios, and it led to one of the biggest layups in gaming history. I think one of the not even a layup, it was a slam dunk. They were given the ball, and they just crashed it right down with another huge, for the time, property, Walking Dead. Now, you're watching this, I'm shooting this in the year of 2025. Walking Dead is not nearly as impactful as it was back in 2012. But 2012 Walking Dead, this game showed up, took the world by storm. The show was everywhere. A young Dan really wanted to watch the Walking Dead show, and his parents said no because it was too graphically violent, which is crazy looking back on some of the stuff I've seen now in movies and even television. But Walking Dead was a bit too far gone. So this game was my only real glimpse into the world of The Walking Dead. Now, this showcases a lot of strengths that Telltale has. They are great at creating characters, they're great at creating tension, they're great at ripping characters away from you, and they are great at incorporating characters from well-known properties into their side stories that don't affect the larger world at whole, but do play a role in the story, if that makes sense. So, for instance, Glenn, very famous, popular character from The Walking Dead, is in this game. Does his story need to include this game at all? No, it doesn't. Does this game story impact Glenn's story at all? No, it doesn't. I mean, it might. You might say it does. Herschel, another character, is in this game. Does his game story affect the show story? No. But does it affect the game story? Yes. So it's a cool way to include characters that people may know, but also doesn't alienate fans of just the game from needing to know who these characters are. Very, very smart, these people at Telltale. And I think The Walking Dead is the best place to do that in, because the world is just planet Earth, and so you can bring in as many characters as you need, intersect them with famous characters in ways that don't impact the show or the comic in any way, and then be able to tell your own story and split off and go in new and interesting ways that it doesn't matter, it doesn't impact anything from the mainline stuff, right? So Walking Dead was lightning in a bottle, and of course created multiple sequels, and it was the final game that they worked on before the inevitable shutdown. So for me, my favorite of the Telltale franchises is The Wolf Among Us. This is based off of the graphic novel of Fables, a very fun and interesting take on old fables. I mean, they go fairy tales, myths, legends, urban legends even, so there's all kinds of interesting wackos and freakazoids and famous characters that can just show up. This game works different than The Walking Dead does, and where it needs to create fully blown new characters, they can use famous characters from the past while also being able to tap into a it's not really a famous comic, but kind of is. Some people know it, people like it, but I would argue that this game is more popular than the comic is. I mean, I might just be in a bubble, but I would say it is. I would guess. Mostly because it did come out right after The Walking Dead, so it became this big thing. The Wolf Among Us was one of the first games I got on my PS4. I remember it feeling like a big leap, even though Telltale games are a little bit rudimentary. They are point-and-click adventure games, at least the ones I've played. I know they have done other games, but the ones that I'm talking about mostly here are the point-and-click adventure games. And I grew up on them. I mean, I have a whole series on this channel talking about the humongous games. Like, I have a very big fondness for point-and-click adventure games, and these seemed like the next step. They had mature stories, they had interesting characters, they had fun plot lines, and they had split-path decisions, which is something I didn't mention yet. So, let's say you're playing Walking Dead, or you're playing Wolf Among Us. Let's stay on that track. You're playing as Bigby Wolf, and you're solving a crime, and you need to decide whether or not someone's innocent or someone's guilty, and that'll affect the story as it goes down the line. Very fun concept. You know, it just works. If you're gonna make a story-based game, make it split path. Make it so that when you make a choice, it matters down the line. But also make it so, like, the choices are timed. Because when you're playing the game, prompts will show up, and you have to make a choice. Or sometimes it's a time-based choice, and those are more stressful. You can't really stop and, like, look it up. I think you can pause it, but that ruins the whole fun. That's the whole point of the game. So after Wolf Among Us, I played a couple more of these. I played Batman, because of course I did, and it's just on Batman story. And I played Game of Thrones. So in Batman and Game of Thrones, I started to see some of the cracks of what was gonna be the inevitable fallout of these games. So Game of Thrones and Batman are good still. I still enjoyed their stories. But the problem is that their characters are so famous, and it's hard to create new ones in those worlds. So Batman, you are playing as Batman, right? So, you know, like, no matter what choice you make, Batman's not going to die or anything like that. Any of the main players, your Alfreds, your Catwomans, even your Jokers, they're not going to die. So the stress of making choices dips way down than it would with any other of the games up to this point. Game of Thrones, on the other hand, you'll be saying, well, Dan, a lot of famous characters died. But that's also the issue, is because Game of Thrones, the characters die so famously that they're not going to die in this game unless they revolve it around a certain character's death, right? The choices you make aren't going to lead up to a famous character's death because the show is so well written. It's so tight that there's no way to really carve your way in there and make big changes in the world without it feeling forced or without it feeling like so fanficky that it doesn't feel like it's Game of Thrones anymore. You play as a small house in the north that has a couple characters, interact with very famous characters. You don't get to play as the famous characters, you just kind of interact with them. You know, North, King's Landing, and stuff like that. You get to meet them, and the choices are based around your house and not having really a lot to do with the main players. So that's an interesting way to go about it. You're playing in the world of Westeros. But like I said, even then, it kind of is the opposite effect of Batman. Like, I kind of want to play as Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, even a Lannister, or if I'm playing a bad guy, let me play a bad guy. So, those are some of the pitfalls of what was happening with Telltale. Another thing was that they came out episodically. And so when you bought the game, I think the thing was that you could buy the game, you could play the first episode for free, and then you can play the rest of them, you had to buy the rest of them. I think it was like a free trial. It sounds like a good deal, and the problem was it was too good of a deal, because the first episode it's like a couple hours. Like, these episodes are not short, so it's not like it was a demo. You play like a fifth of the game, and you got a fifth of the game for free. And so people would play it, and then they would just stop. I think that when Telltale went under, they did show that the amount of people that bought the second episode like, the numbers were just so far less than was in the first one. So the episodic release structure didn't really work, especially since an episode would come out and then, like, it was a month, sometimes multiple months before the next one came out, so people had forgotten what happened in the first part. I waited until they were all out and then got to play them all at my leisure, but especially at the time, people were not as conscious about spoilers. People were doing Let's Play, so if you followed somebody that was playing these games, sometimes it was easier just to watch them play it. It was a big mess. It was a big mess, and also, you know, I was telling you some of the games they're making. Walking Dead, and Batman, and Game of Thrones, and Wolf Among Us, and Guardians of the Galaxy, and even Minecraft got a Telltale game. Like, there were so many Telltale games that came out, and they flooded their own market. On top of that, competitors started popping up. Like, I think the best game in this style is Until Dawn, which is not a Telltale game. So, all of a sudden, you have competitors that are, in my opinion, doing your style of gameplay better. So where do you go? Keep growing, but also not selling as much, and then you kind of go belly up. And that was the unfortunate fate of Telltale, which really stinks because there was a big world here, and there was a lot of cool stories that they were trying to tell. And, you know, Batman got a sequel, and like I said, Walking Dead got multiple parts. The Wolf Among Us was supposed to get a sequel, and luckily, and this was and might still be the biggest hype moment at a Game Awards that I've ever felt, was seeing Wolf Among Us 2 be re-announced to the world. I've been so unequivocally excited for this game since it got unveiled, and I cannot wait for it to finally drop. And I hope that they don't make us wait month to month to play each episode. I'm fine with it being episodic. I'm happy with it feeling like 2013 again, and I just got my PS4 for Christmas and Wolf Among Us, and playing it episode by episode and just really enjoying the whole story. But don't make us wait. Drop all 5 episodes on the disc, and as soon as you hit download, all 5 come with it. You got a win on your hands. People are excited. People want them again. At least I think I do. Right? It was a capper to the Game Awards. Clearly, someone in the industry thinks it's a big deal. Anyways, have you played a Telltale game? Which one is your favorite if you have played? Of course, you know me. Wolf Among Us, that's my favorite. I'm actually, I was making this video because I was kind of itching to play one again. And I might pick up Guardians of the Galaxy. I never played that game. I always kind of wanted to. So I might get around to finally playing it. So, anyways, let me know down below. Thank you so very much for watching, and as always, like this if you like this, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you at some point.